No, thank you. Sleepy. You come back in an hour. Need sleepy. Please go away. Let me sleep for the love of God!
It's now time for the Billy C Morning Show, part of the Billy C Boxing Network. Interact with the show at BillyCBoxing.com.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C Morning Show. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing all right. Today's show is being brought to us in part by Sal's Neighborhood Pizzeria and Italian Restaurant located in St. Simons Island, Georgia. Find out why I think it's got the best pizza on the planet. Visit the website, drool over the menu, www.salsneighborhoodpizzeria.com, or give my man a call, 912-268-2328, 912-268-2328. Tell him Billy C sent you. Today's show is also being brought to you in part by JKJ Boxing Magazine. It's for free. Yeah, you don't need to take out a mortgage for this publication. Visit our website, www.billycboxing.com, and click on the JKJ Boxing Magazine and subscribe. You could download it for free or get the magazine delivered to your door if you pay postage. And today's show is being brought to you in part by my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage, The Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. You can literally get the copy of the book right now by visiting www.barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com. Now, if you like the electronic versions, Kindle and Nook have it as well. Before we get started, I want to apologize. I know we got some issues going on with the new chat room. Some people are in the old chat room and some people are in the new chat room. We're working on that. Also, I want to give a shout out to our listeners on ESPN New Hampshire. Glad you guys could join us this morning, and we're glad to be part of your sports programming. Coming up in a little bit, we got my man Larry Hazard joining us. We'll get his thoughts on the fights from last weekend. We also have the blast from the past. Alex Papali will stop by and talk about former world heavyweight champion and boxing Hall of Famer Joe Louis. I got some emails to try and get to, and remember, if you've sent, we're getting stacked up a little bit because of our limited schedule this week. But if you sent an email, don't worry about it. I will read it. I'm reading them in order. I also have some news to talk about with the WBC. Once again, smoke and mirrors there. And the fight that never took place that we all wanted to see, Sean Porter going up against Keith Thurman. I got some quotes from the press conference yesterday, but hold stop the presses. Hold the phone. Don't put down the coffee, okay? Put down that coffee, and please welcome my man, Sal Rocky Cenicola. What's up, brother?
Good morning, Billy. How are you today?
Not too bad. How'd you like that intro, huh?
I like that, man. I like that a lot.
Not bad, right? not bad for an Italian, huh?
Hey, I wouldn't expect anything less, pal. Thank you.
I got some new. I want to get started right away, but
Let's go.
I know the emails are important and stuff, but I Sal, I always get going about, and yesterday I got going a little bit. Got going a little bit about Triple G, and man, there was a lot of communication back and forth about yesterday's show. And you got the pro Triple G fans and the guys that just don't want to give him any kind of credit. But today, I want to focus on the WBC and their smoke and mirrors BS that they pull all the time. They try to act like they're the best or the only sanctioning body. They also act, not that I wish that there were only one, but they also act like they are boxing. They set the rules, and I love getting their press release. Well, I hate getting their press release, but I love reading them, and the nature and the flow of their pressers kind of indicate that they drive the sport. And let me tell you one that came out yesterday. Basically, they're not sanctioning any more boxing in Toronto, Canada, for various reasons. And to me, it sounds like somebody didn't want to pay off the WBC. But here's here's a line that caught my attention that I want to get your thoughts on because it's right up your alley. According to the WBC, they're not happy with the Ontario Athletic Commission because, and I quote, this is a quote from the WBC, the OAC, which is the Ontario Athletic Commission, conducts its official weigh-ins the day of the fight. There is ample, listen, they're kicking them to the curb because of this. They do their weigh-ins the day of the fight. There is ample medical evidence that weigh-in practices, that the same-day weigh-in practice is dangerous and can be detrimental to the health and safety of the fighters. To me, Sal, this is total BS and a total smokescreen. I want to see the WBC, after making statements like this, and this isn't the only statement, they make these kind of crazy statements all the time. I want to see this evidence because we've talked about this many, many times. I think it's more detrimental to a fighter to have to dry out and lose all that weight to make the weigh-in the day before, and then put their body through that stress, and then hydrate up and everything else. What's your thoughts on the same-day weigh-ins and the safety aspect that the WBC is trying to get all these new breed of fans to believe?
Well, you did hit it right up my alley here. And, for them to say that is detrimental to the well-being of the fighter, well, guess what? Stepping inside the ring could be detrimental to anyone. So, let's look at it. Let's call a spade, and let's call a ring a hoop. I'm teasing. Anyway, I feel that WBC's stance has really got to take a step back. This could be, something coming up on the forefront. I'm a big fan of having the same-day weigh-ins. That's how it was up until my last fight in 1988 against Louis Lamelli. And I thought that, having the weigh-ins the day of is a fair, honest goal to achieve and in a timely manner. You rehydrate yourself, and this way, you could fight 2-3 weight classes down if you know how to take the weight off. And yes, you do dry out. You don't drink anything for 24 hours, and you're running in a wetsuit, the rubber suits, and everything else to get to that weight, knowing you're going to have a full day to hydrate yourself and get your strength back. And you could be 20 pounds heavier, 10, 15 pounds heavier than when you weighed in for the weight class. I don't think that's fair. I think that the fighter should be weighed in the day of the fight, and this way, if he's within the striking distance of where his body should be, and maybe he'll come into the ring 5 to 10 pounds heavier. But again, I'm a big fan of the way it used to be, like I am in a lot of traditional ways that we no longer paid attention to because everyone wants to change the rules or everybody wants to lower the bar.
Well, I know that the prior day of the fight weigh-ins, the fighters are clearly drying out and they're trying to get an edge, and I understand that. I mean, a fighter tries to get on that scale and weigh as little as they can, let's say for welterweight division, and then rehydrate, and the theory is the fighter that can dehydrate more and weigh less for the weigh-in and then rehydrate and be bigger for the fight has an advantage. But I can't see how coming in at the weight of a weight class, so therefore the day of weigh-ins, I think would define the weight classes more accurately. In other words, a fighter that's a 147-pounder really isn't going to be able to take off that much weight if they're weighing in the same day without losing energy and everything else. The theory with the day before is that they can, rehydrate and get strong again overnight. They have a 24-hour period. The same day weigh-ins, they wouldn't. But in a sense, I think that you're evening the playing field and you're actually having fighters fighting at the correct weight. So therefore, a guy that can put on a lot of weight, let's say like Saul Canelo Alvarez, who has been known to be able to drop 15 pounds at least at a weigh-in would have to be fighting at his regular weight. I think it's actually safer. I don't have this mysterious medical evidence that the WBC claims that it's safer to dehydrate and weigh in the day before. I just think, the OAC didn't throw some money their way.
No, and I agree. I agree because, I agree with everything you said. You articulated that very well. And I believe, having the weigh-ins the morning of the fight, 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, whenever you want to do it, is more likely to be the correct boxing weight, because a guy's not going to want to go down too low where he's not going to get his strength back and hydrate himself enough to just walk into the ring that night feeling like he's in outer space to begin with. So I'll tell you, I've been there. I've torn off 30 pounds. I've torn off 20 pounds, but I always did it and weighed in the day of the fight. And I often, by the end of the day, by fight time, I was still on that 135-pound lightweight limit, and because I wouldn't eat that much, I just hydrate myself. And so, yeah, I agree that the morning of, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and I think in the long run it will be safer. But let me get an email out of the way before we take a break here. This one's from my man Jesse. He says, "Hey Billy C, I want to see Triple G against Rosado or Sanders if Canelo Chicken does not come through. I saw Rosado versus Triple G fight again, and I thought Rosado, out of all the Triple G opponents, did the most work and most damage. If you watch round 5, Rosado put Triple G in some difficult, put in some difficulties. I don't know what he means. With pressure and punches, Triple G was getting tired and wasn't punching the same. Rosado was a warrior and put on a fight. As we all know, Triple G already beat Gabe Rosado. But yeah, I actually think Triple G has gotten a lot better since then. I think he's way more polished and everything. But I mean, this just goes without saying. The same thing we've been talking about. Nobody wants to fight this guy, Sal.
I know. Nobody wants to fight him, and that's what they're going to look at. They're going to look at, pulling at strings in a sense, and they're reaching. And, it's clear that Triple G has pretty much put himself out there as a middleweight champion. He would fight anybody that they bring his way as a middleweight contender. And I think he gets a tough deal on that note. He really is a good competitive athlete, and he's a great polished work technician where he does what he has to do to get himself in condition. And he is evolving. He is still working on some things, but he has the leverage, the stance, and the power that's laying out a lot of these 160-pounders. And, I don't see him running away from too many of them that are coming up to him at 160.
Coach just makes a great point in the chat room. He says if 24-hour weigh-ins are so safe, then why did the amateurs weigh in the same day? That's a great point. That's
coach, that's why he's a coach.
Yeah, I mean,
he knows.
that says it all, because the amateur program, we go out of our way to protect the young people.
We sure do.
So
hey, I was a wrestler in high school, and we usually weighed in at maybe I think we weighed in about 4 o'clock or 4:30 to two teams got in a scale with the referee there. And, we had to make our weight. We had maybe 15 minutes to a half hour if we didn't make the weight, to make the weight. And we wrestled an hour and a half, 2 hours later.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's way safer. And our weight divisions will be more accurate, I think.
Big time.
Jesse says, what's your thoughts on Kenneth Islam? I feel he's untested, to be honest, which his next fight against Juan D'Angel won't really show us anything. I mean, Juan D'Angel is a come-at-you brawler-type fighter, and Kenneth Islam can box a bit. So, this is a typical fighter that's being calculated. He's being moved, with limited risk. So I mean that's what you're getting. You're watching a fighter get built up. He says, Billy, I'm interested in watching Gomez against Herrera. This is where Gomez must show that he's the future and display his skills and new skills that he's learned through his fights. I agree. He says, do you see Diego De La Hoya's opponent as a legit opponent? No. I think they're overprotecting him. I'll leave you guys with that thought. We're going to take a short break. Sal, don't you go anywhere.
Forget about it. I'm right here, Billy.
We'll be back in 2.
The Billy C. Morning Show will be right back.
Hey, fight fans, check out KOFantasyBoxing.com. KO Fantasy Boxing is boxing's only trademarked fantasy game. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Select your own gym, your own fighters, track them through a season that can last from 3 months to a year, depending upon which league you join. You got to check this out, man. www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Join it today. Again, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. And tell them Billy C sent ya.
Check out BillyCBoxing.com now, or feel the wrath of the mighty mustache.
Oh, that hurts. Why are you doing that to my face? I hate you.
That's BillyCBoxing.com. Consider this your warning.
Now, back to the Billy C. Morning Show. Interact with the show at BillyCBoxing.com.
And we're back. You're listening to the Billy C. Morning Show. Today's show is being brought to us in part by JKJ Boxing Magazine. If you're looking for a magazine that you can afford, check out JKJ Boxing Magazine. You can get yourself a free copy. Oh, did I mention? It's for free by visiting our website, www.BillyCBoxing.com, and clicking on the JKJ Boxing Magazine banner. Also, today's show is being brought to us in part by Sal's Neighborhood Pizzeria, an Italian restaurant located in beautiful St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Check out the website, www.salsneighborhoodpizzeria.com. And speaking of Sal Rocky Cenicola is with me right now. And Sal, I got another email, and this one's from our man Joel, our buddy Joel, who's usually in the chat room. He says, hey, Billy C, with Canelo seemingly avoiding Triple G after Triple G's destruction of Wade this past Saturday, who realistically can you see K2 matching him up with that HBO will accept as opponent? Curious if you can give us a few names. That's a tough one, Sal, because nobody's really wanting to fight this cat, and with the political landscape, not to talk about Trump, winning, but with the political landscape, I mean, realistically, the only guys I see maybe him fighting next, if Canelo punks out like we're anticipating him, is maybe Billy Joe Saunders or Chris Eubank Jr. I mean, what do you think?
I think you're right. And, I'll tell you, I said from the get-go, and you can remember we talked about it, I think Canelo Alvarez will be biting off too much when he steps in the ring, if he does step in the ring with Triple G. I think Triple G is just too big and strong, and will be able to move around and him with the body shots and hurt him. Because also Alvarez likes to go towards his fighters too, his opponents.
Here's another email. This one's from my man Chris, and the subject on this email. And by the way, if anybody wants to drop an email to get your thoughts, or if you have any questions or comments, just feel free. Billy at Talkin' Boxing. That's TalkinBoxing.com. The subject on this one, Sal, is boxing versus UFC. He says, Billy, how the heck did last week's UFC show double the ratings of NBC's boxing? The UFC show had both of its main events canceled, and the third important match became the main event. I'm a fan of both, and NBC had the better event. Is boxing dead on mainstream TV? Also, why are the networks like CBS Sports and Showtime using wrestling announcers as their play-by-play men? I'm sure they are good at what they do, but it's blurring the lines between a real contest and a predetermined event. We used to be worried about announcers having an HBO or Showtime bias. Now the nets have hired, meaning networks, have hired legit script reading shills. Maybe you're right. Boxing has become like the WWE. At least the WWE doesn't insult our intelligence. Thanks for your time. This is my man, Chris. Very well put, Sal.
Very well put.
The truth of the matter is my man, Coach, once again, he's getting a lot of accolades today, but, he had, I'd love to take the credit, but Coach is the guy who started saying boxing is like the WWE 2 years ago, and I tell you what, my man Chris is right. Here's the UFC. They lose their two main events. The third one on the slate still beats out an NBC, a network broadcast fight card. And, to top it all off, they're putting the Hub Buzz Showbiz, Rock'em Sock'em announcers in there yelling and screaming at us. I think the writing's on the wall. I hate to say it. It really is.
Yeah. You and I discussed this years ago. What do we need to do to get back the glamour and the interest into boxing? And, we had a simple outline plan, but I don't think we could ever turn that clock back the way that it should be. And we need some personalities. We need some people that are going to help give the audience and the fans what they're looking for. And, there's a few fighters that may have that ability to do so right now, but we need more than just a handful of fighters.
You make an interesting point, Sal, but my question back to you, I'm throwing it back to you.
You throw it this way.
The bottom line is this. The fans aren't demanding it.
No,
us old guys are, because we have something to compare it to. And a lot of the purist boxing fan and the diehard boxing fans, they're crying and they're agreeing with us. But the new fan, the relatively new or young fan, they think this is great. They love it. They think that the more titles, the better. They think that watching their favorite fighter just annihilate third or fourth tier opponents, and just because they're flashing cash around and wearing lots of bling and got an undefeated record. I mean, to them that's a champion, and with that kind of outlook, it ain't gonna get better. I mean, you could see why I'm having a hard time keeping interest.
No, well, here you just said something else. And part of it is the legacy of the sport, the boxing. I remember part of my interest was perked up when I was just 5 or 6 years old, when I'd sit around the parlor and we'd hear our relatives all talk about Tony Canzonieri or Tammy Moriello, who were kind of related to the family through marriage and all this stuff, and Gus Lesnovich was also married into our family. So we'd hear the stories, but then again, that's what I'm saying. It was passed down. There was an interest. There was that cultivation of well, here's how fighting works, and here's what's going on. Here's the tough guys. Here's this. So we looked at it as youngsters, and we took an interest. And, I'm using the word parlor because that's how far back a living room, that's the old tradition. And I'll have to tell you this, that I don't think that fighting is the family topic of the discussion at the dinner table, like it may have been a couple generations ago or a couple decades ago. Also, you have these young fans coming up, and they like the shock appeal of the MMA. And the brutal nature of it, and for them, boxing is not as I guess competitive on that level. But I think it just has to do with how they're being introduced to the sports as a kid, and how their interest is growing as a young adult. So we're in a lot of trouble with boxing.
First of all, there is no more conversation anymore at the dinner table, because all they do is text each other. You're sitting next to somebody in the family, and they don't talk to you; they text you. And the young people today, because although MMA can be brutal at times, it can also be pretty damn boring. I mean, I've called several MMA events, and sometimes when these guys get locked in specific holds on the mat, waiting to try to have their opponent tap out or whatever, it could be very boring. I think one of the reasons the young people like it is because it's shorter. Each fight is not drawn out, and And I know MMA is calculated, and I know that there's strategy involved, but not so much like boxing, where you have a 12-round fight. You want to break that opponent down for 6 rounds and then catch up with them later on. I mean, I just don't think the attention span is and the vocabulary, No, but I don't think the attention span is as wide as it used to be,
Well, it may be that too, Bill. And that's people love baseball. Some people don't like baseball because it's too long of a game. And you're going to have your fans that choose their sports. But I think the youth and in the younger generations, they're being introduced to MMA and by their friends, by their older siblings, by however it is. And they're seeing that for the first time. And that's what they think is their norm, their regular, their sport, versus boxing, which didn't have the exposure on public television recently as it did 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Although it's trying to make an effort to come back, I think it's going to be a slow climb back up to the top. And, we've got to do some certain things to put in place to get the sport back into the ring of things.
Nah, the only way it ever will get back to what we're talking about is if fighters actually fight, if promoters actually promote, if fans smarten up and just say no to all this BS, but as long as they're buying it and as long as they're supporting it, we're going to keep getting it. I mean, there's no question, and there's no way around that.
Absolutely. And like I said one time with you before, it's a prize fight. It's a championship fight. It's a prize fight. Why not let the winner get they should almost set the purses. Okay, winner of this fight gets this amount, loser of the fight gets that amount. And let's see. You know what? And maybe, hey, anything over the ticket sales or promotional sales goes to a slush fund to go to some fighters' retirement old age fund. I don't know.
No,
but,
you're right.
Instead of greed in people's pockets.
Yeah, well,
but when you look at the purses and how big they are and how they're already pre-signed and predetermined, let's give somebody an incentive to win and take all the money they can, but let them win and earn it. That's what the prize fight was all about.
Yeah, well,
the bigger purse, the bigger money.
If they were fighting like that, nobody would ever fight. It would be really dead. Let's get people caught up on some sports scores in Major League Baseball. Phillies topped the Nationals 4-3. The White Sox beat the Blue Jays 10-1. A's over the Tigers 5-1. Red Sox beat the Braves 11-4. My Mets, there's one good team in New York. My Mets came from a 3-0 deficit to beat the Reds 4-3 last night. Logan Verrett, he's a 25-year-old kid. He gets the win. Bartolo Colon started the game, but Verrett came in. He's now 3-0. Logan Verrett, 25 years old, 3-0 with a 0.55 ERA. This kid was a great signing for the Mets. I'm looking forward to his development the rest of the year. Rangers topped your Yankees 10-1. I mean,
all right,
did the Yankees even come to play? They're now 8-11, and they're starting to play the way I had anticipated. They did start off pretty hot. The Rays beat the Orioles 3-1. Cubbies over the Brews 4-3. Twins over the Tribe 6-5. Pirates 9. Rockies 4. Cardinals beat the Diamondbacks 8-2. Angels beat the Royals 9-4. Mariners over the Astros 11-1. Marlins 6, Dodgers 3, and the Giants blanked the Padres 1-0. Over in the NBA playoffs, the Raptors beat the Pacers 102-99 to lead that series 3-2. The Hawks beat the Celtics 110-83. They also lead the series 3-2. In the NHL, there was no action last night, but on NBC Sportsnet, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, my Islanders will play the Lightning to kick off the second round of the Eastern Conference. And then following that game, same channel, will be Game 7 in the Western Conference first round to determine who will be moving into the second round. The Predators are taking on the Quack Quack Ducks. So, yeah, we got, every other sport seems like it's rolling pretty easily except for boxing. Quick thoughts, you got 10 seconds.
Well, yeah.
8.
Every other sport has different guidelines, and they seldom change the rules or change the expectations for the fans as the rounds, as weigh-ins, as purses. I think you want to try to get boxing back on the map in the living rooms, in the families, into our culture again. You got to start with introducing it to the youth, and you got to start introducing it to the fans that really are willing to have an interest and look at boxing the way it used to be.
Yeah, it's going to be.
And get back to some of the rules. Don't keep lowering the benchmark. Boxing was a tough
gotta take
sport.
a break,
It was the
Sal.
ultimate sport.
I got to cut you off. I got to take a break. Sorry about that.
Okay.
ESPN New Hampshire is very strict with us. But hey,
I
listen,
guess so.
Sal, great shot as usual. I'll give you a shot a little bit later.
Okay, buddy. I look forward to talking to you. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
You too, brother. We'll be back in 2.
The Billy C. Morning Show will be right back.
Hey, fight fans, check out KOFantasyBoxing.com. KO Fantasy Boxing is boxing's only trademarked fantasy game. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Select your own gym, your own fighters, track them through a season that can last from 3 months to a year, depending upon which league you join. You got to check this out, man. www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Join it today. Again, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com, and tell them Billy C sent ya.
Now let's dig into our archives and hear a rare interview when Billy C. first became the champion of boxing talk radio. Hello, Billy C. As the new champ, can we ask you a few questions?
Why, certainly.
Okay, your fans would like to know how you and your corner have successfully walloped the competition.
We're not ordinary people. We're morons.
Anything else?
I'm a victim of circumstance.
Did your success finally come when you made the show 5 days a week for 2 hours? What do you think?
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Now, please tell the listeners what you've learned from making it this far.
Certainly. If at first you don't succeed, keep on sucking till you do succeed.
Great words of wisdom, Billy C. Keep up the great work as the undisputed People's Champion with your show, Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. Any last words to anyone who's listening?
This is your fault, you bonehead.
Check out BillyCBoxing.com now, or feel the wrath of the mighty mustache.
Oh, that hurts. Why are you doing that to my face? I hate you.
That's BillyCBoxing.com. Consider this your warning.
Now back to the Billy C. Morning Show. Interact with the show at BillyCBoxing.com.
And we're back. You're listening to the Billy C. Morning Show. Today's show is being brought to us in part by Sal's Neighborhood Pizzeria. Check out the best pizza. I'm telling you. And I'm a fat bastard, I know. www.salsneighborhoodpizzeria.com. Find out what I'm talking about. Today's show is also being brought to you in part by my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now. Get yourself a copy. Go to Barnes & Noble or barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com or Nook or Kindle, whatever. But joining me right now, Boxing Hall of Famer and New Jersey's Boxing Commissioner, my man Larry Hazard. What's up, brother? Are you there, Larry? Oh, sounds like a seashell. We will try to get Larry back on. So we'll see what happens in a sec. But I'm curious because I wanted to get Larry's thoughts on the WBC's newest smoke screen. So we'll see what goes on now. But it seems like let me see if Larry.
Please record your.
No, I guess Larry's MIA today. So we'll have to move on. So we'll see what see what else we can go. Maybe my man. I cut him off before, but let's see if we can get Sal back on. But I got a couple of more emails we can read, so I'll do that. I'm actually I just got a glimpse of a really scary thought. It looked like Sal. It looked like Sal Rocky Cenicola. Are you back on the air? I saw that.
We gotta implement that Skype one day.
I tell you, I can't. I got scared there for a minute. But anyway, I just, I figured we'd get you back on. We're having some connection problems with Larry, and since I cut you off before, I figured we'll get you back on.
I would like that. Thank you so much. Good to be back on.
No problem. We got no impromptu callback.
That's pretty good.
It happens. It happens sometimes.
Happens.
We got another email I wanted to read and get your thoughts on it, and I'm sure you have some stuff to maybe throw at me. I know you've been searching worldwide for what's going on, but this one is from my man Alex T, the other Alex, and he says, hey, Billy C., have you ever had a friend or family member that constantly makes poor decisions and keeps letting you down, and after a while it doesn't even bother you anymore? You could just expect that person to be a potential screw-up, and eventually you just accept that's who they are. That's how I'm starting to feel about boxing these days. I watched a Triple G fight with about as much emotion as if I was watching the Home Shopping Network. It's not Triple G's fault it was a mismatch, but it is what I've come to expect. The same with the announcement that Anthony Joshua is going to fight Dominic Breazeale. I wouldn't expect any different at this point, and I'm not even mad anymore. I kind of don't care, to be honest, and that's the scary part. When a guy like me who used to sit in class and write about the lineal heavyweight champions in my notebook, when a guy who collected Ring magazines and kept a scrapbook of newspaper clippings doesn't care anymore, man, the sport's in a tough spot. I do wonder where my tipping point will be, where I don't care enough to watch anymore. I'm not there yet, but I'm not far. He says two quick things. My favorite Jack Dempsey story is when he was in his 70s and getting out of a cab in front of his restaurant. Two guys tried to mug him. He flattened them both and waited for the cops to arrive. He says, I also ordered your book, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Well, first and foremost, Alex T., I appreciate you getting a book, and I promise you're going to enjoy it. I, too, like that story of Jack Dempsey. I remember hearing about that many, many times. One point I do want to make about this email is that I disagree about the Anthony Joshua-Dominic Breazeale fight. Although I agree with the tone that Anthony Joshua was going to win, it's actually a good fight, and I respect Anthony Joshua for even taking that fight. Dominic Breazeale is a young, up-and-coming fighter. But Sal, everything else that Alex T. wrote in this is so dead nuts on. I mean, I agree with it, and I'm feeling the same pain as Alex is. It's true. I mean, the mismatches and what the outcome's going to be, the way the fighters are, their personalities. We just don't have that personality anymore. We got a lot of I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and they do none of that stuff. And I mean, what do you think of Alex's points? I mean, didn't he hit it right on?
He hit it right on, and it's a shame because exactly, that's from the heart of a good fan, a lifelong fan, and that's the kind of fan you want to have the emotion, the introduction, this and that to pass down to the younger generations to perk their interest and to keep their interest. No, it's a shame. There was always, in the history of boxing, there was always a mismatch here and there. Even in the 70s and 80s, when you could find boxing on every Saturday with CBS Sports or Wild World of Sports, and you had it in your living room every day or parlor. And, the bottom line, if there was a bad fight or a mismatched fight, guess what? You had another fight later that day that would be a great fight. So you had a few bumps, but you had more of the smooth road because boxing supported itself, promoted itself, and it was in our living rooms. It was in our water cooler discussions, in the coffee clutches that we talked about. So that's what's dissipated, and that's what's happening. And part of the reason is why boxing is becoming a sport that no longer holds the interest of many, many heartfelt fans that love the sport.
You know, you're right. I mean, and I'm not even trying to suggest that back in the day, even prior to the 70s and 80s, you keep going back all the way for the whole history of the sport. And of course, there were the so-called layup fights, but the difference was that they fought more often, so it was easier to accept a layup fight and then a good fight, then a layup fight, then a good fight, or even two layup fights and then a good fight. Nowadays we see a fighter fight 3 times a year, and if we get a competitive one out of those 3, we jump for joy. That's the big difference. Every time you turn on a fight, with your favorite fighter, if you have one, they're fighting, and if he happens to be or she happens to be the A side, they're constantly fighting less than stellar opposition.
That's true. And also, we had a lot of domestic fighters that were always holding our interest. And we had a lot of the Olympians that bred the way, that cleared the path. And we had the interest. We saw them fight. We saw them get their gold or silver medals. And we saw how the sports networks groom them and help cultivate and showcase these fighters every week. Remember the old Wide World of Sports, up close and personal. They got into the history, the lives of the fighters. But we had a lot of domestic fighters that we looked at, and we had interest. Then you had fighters from South America, you had fighters from Canada, from England, from other sources, but you had also these Soviet bloc countries that we never got an idea of who their fighters were. That's all done. So now we have a plethora of all fighters, and it's saturated, and with all these different world sanctioning bodies and how they've divvied up the belts into a showcase of trophies. It's just it's bad. It's bad for boxing. There should be one champion for every weight class, and there should be one fighter that defends all.
Plethora. Parlor, geez, you're really. What do you got? What do you got? Webster's Dictionary in front of you this morning?
No.
Hey,
this
people probably don't.
It's part of my early reading in my training camps.
people probably don't even know what Webster's is anymore because now they think that's Google. But hey, let's get some quotes. Keith Thurman, Sean Porter. My question to everybody out there: who do you think is going to win and why? Drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. Now, if you're following this story, Keith Thurman and Sean Porter were scheduled to fight a month or so ago, until Keith Thurman came up with an auto accident that was awfully strange. The internet went crazy. Social media went crazy. A lot of people speculate that Keith Thurman was just not ready for Sean Porter and actually fabricated a story. I saw some photos and, Klumso, basically investigative opinions from people looking at the car and photos of the car, feeling that, there was really no injury to Keith Thurman, no doctor's report, nothing like that. We'll never know, but nonetheless, the fight is or has been rescheduled June 25th. And yesterday was a press conference in New York City where we got some quotes. Keith Thurman said, and I quote, "I made you wait, but it's worth it. This is a tremendous fight, arguably the best matchup of the year. We're going to work our butts off to make it the fight of the year. Our two teams go way back. This is the most beautiful moment of my professional career, and I'm about to compete with somebody I grew up with. I'm happy for my success, and I'm happy for Sean's success. We come from the same boat. When you're a young kid training in the gym, and you're here today, that takes a special kind of person. Sean and I are both that kind of person. We took 6 weeks off after my accident with 3 days a week of physical therapy. I was relaxing at home. I didn't like it. As a fighter, I wanted this fight as bad as the fans wanted. 3 days a week physical therapy. I mean, the guy had a muscle bruise. I'm not buying it. But anyway, He said, "This isn't just the biggest fight of my career, but it's the most anticipated fight of my career. Sometimes it pays to add some drama. It wasn't our intention, but it worked out." He says, "I anticipate most of the welterweight division being in attendance on June 25th. The situation that the division's in right now, we're all in a frenzy. Everybody wants the spotlight, and everybody wants to be the top dog." He says, "Come June 22nd, my friend will be my enemy. I'm going to treat him like any other enemy." As far as Sean Porter, always a classy guy. He says, "I'm interested and excited about this fight. I'm blessed to have this opportunity not only to go for the title, but to be part of a record-breaking show at the Barclays Center. This night will be memorable. Keith Thurman is bringing out the competitiveness in me to a level I've always wanted. It's a level I expect. I have a guy next to me who's challenging me more than ever. Me and Keith Thurman are going to put on a show. Everything you've talked about, you're going to get." He says, "I wasn't surprised that Keith said he would knock me out. He has to pump himself up and get confident. When he looked at me, I think he's trying to convince me that he's being real, and I was looking at him to find out if he was convinced. He thinks he's gonna knock me out. I say he's not. I'm gonna do everything it takes to beat him and make it look easy." He says, "I'm not changing anything in our camp because of how familiar Keith and I are with each other. I have to do it right in the ring." He says, "We're going to do everything we need to do to prepare for a world championship fight." He says, "I have a feeling Keith is going to say he's knocking me out a lot. I want to know if he really believes it. He's a cutthroat kind of a fighter. I know that. The hands will be up. The defense will be taken care of, and we'll be taking care of business." I'm really looking forward to this fight, Sal. And, I like both of these fighters a lot. And Keith Thurman, I thought, was a really good fighter, and I think his whole outlook and style has changed. He's become a safety-first fighter, and Sean Porter, on the other hand, is a fighter who never stops coming at you. And I'm leaning towards Sean Porter in this fight, and I do believe deep down that Keith Thurman kind of purposely bailed on that fight. There was a lot of rumors that the accident didn't take place. There's a lot of rumors that he wanted more money. Nothing has been confirmed, but what's your early thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good fight. I'm going to watch it, and I think as you said, their styles definitely make this a very good fight. And Keith Thurman, once you look at the safety issues and everything else, it's good. It's good to keep that in mind. But you're closing that eye of the tiger in a sense, and he's looking out for safety, and I can understand that. But you got to fight. You got to go in that squared circle. You got to. I always use my buddy Aaron Pryor's favorite line: "You got to fight to win." And Sean Porter is a good, tough, aggressive fighter, and I could see Porter definitely beating Thurman. And I think anything that can be done to make a fight into a story. Are these guys doing it? Maybe they're trying to get the excitement, get the money, get this and that, create some drama. Who knows? But I think it's going to be a good fight. I'm going to look forward to it, and I think right now Porter may have a nice edge going in.
It should make a good fight, and it's the kind of fight that boxing needs, where you got two top fighters in the division. Just currently, I don't want to put them in the Hall of Fame yet, but I mean, two top fighters in the division today fighting each other, which has become an exception, not the norm. And I'm looking forward to it. I wish it had already taken place, but it is what it is. I got one more email. Let's read this, and we'll get your thoughts. This one's from my man James. He says, "Hey, Billy C, for a few years there's been a movement to ban kickoffs in pro football in order to make the game safer. In a similar vein, a movement wants to ban head punches in boxing. Both movements are... I like this so far because I'm like sick when I heard them trying to ban kickoffs in football, and we talked about making it illegal to hit in the head in boxing a few weeks back. So I want to see what he says. He says, "Both movements are products of an attitude that people need to be protected from anything dangerous or risky. That way of thinking drives me crazy. And I agree with James so far. He said, I wrote about a similar issue a few years ago, and I included a long list of injury stats. I'm not going to do that now because the numbers are 100% besides the point. Football is dangerous. Boxing is dangerous. That being said, not everything dangerous should be illegal. People have a right to choose what they do with their bodies. If people don't approve of full contact sports, hey, they don't have to watch it. In the same mindset, wanting a ban, he says, it's the same mindset as wanting to ban smoking in bars because some people don't approve of it. If someone doesn't approve of smoking, they shouldn't go to the bars. Smoking may be dirt, stupid, but people have the right to do it. Of course, if they smoke for 30 years, they shouldn't be able to sue tobacco companies. Part of making choices is accepting the consequences. I agree with that. He says, likewise, people have a right to participate in full contact sports. However, if they do, they shouldn't be able to sue the league when they get a concussion. Full contact sports involve full contact. You play the game, you take your chances, but that doesn't mean we should water down the game. We could build safe cars, recall dangerous baby cribs, and do 1,000 other things to protect each other. Yet we'll never be able to make life 100% safe. We shouldn't try. People need to be free to be people, not robots. A wise man once said, sitting in church, eating bran flakes is safe. You take your chances with everything else. This is from my man James Keister, Sal. And not only do I agree with this email 100%, I want to applaud him because I think that he hit it right on the head.
Right on the head.
And
I agree 100%.
I mean, there's nothing I can really add. I mean, I agree with everything James says. What do you think?
He hit it right on the head. I agree 100%. Like I said, it's inherent. We heard as youngsters, football is dangerous. You get banged in the head. You can break a bone. You could break a limb. Boxing is dangerous. You get banged in the head. You could get punched. You could get maimed. You could get paralyzed in the neck. We know these things. And if you have to have athletes who enter into professional sports sign a waiver or disclaimer or something else, disclosure, that's the next step. But don't change the sport. We all know as athletes what we're getting into. It's just that the prize at that time is worth the price. And once an athlete comes to terms and realizes, guess what? This prize is no longer worth the price. Then they should be able to get out and do what they got to do. And the money that these athletes are paid today, they could do one. They want to shorten their lifespan as an athlete. They could do 3 seasons, have a total of 30 fights, whatever it could be. And you know what? Do what you want to do, but everybody should be able to make their own decision, and not have anybody else come in and change the sports of how they've evolved and how they've been done for decades and decades and generations.
No, I agree, and I agree with the bottom line that just because a study shows, and I'm not disputing the safety issue here,
no,
but just because the study shows, why are we letting, and this falls into the same thing with politics and government. Why do we let people dictate? I mean, yes, you can't have everybody doing whatever the hell they want because then it becomes chaotic. But when it becomes something like this, where we all have choices. At least in this country, we can choose what we want to do. If you want to play a sport that's dangerous, as long as the athletes know what chances they are taking and they're educated to that means, and they are taught what ramifications could take place down the road based on these studies and what have you, they still get to make their own choice, whether they need other opinions to make that choice or whatever. But at the end of the day, the fix isn't to say, now we don't, have kickoffs because too many people get injured, or boxing from now on you're not allowed to punch in the head. I don't understand why boxing gets such a bad rep, but yet in MMA, a guy gets taken to the canvas and you're allowed to pummel him while he's down, and nobody's complaining about that. I think it's ridiculous. Yeah, exactly. Yet I think it's ridiculous. And the smoking comparison here is a really good example. Now I don't smoke, but I tell you, people that do are clearly treated as second-class citizens, and that wasn't the case. I mean, I could see not being able to smoke in a public place, but nowadays, if for the smoker, they gotta go. They gotta practically leave the area, the building, into a designated area that's filled with smoke, But it is what it is, right?
Yeah, that was a great analogy with the smoking and everything else, and even with smoking, we were taught in school as young as I guess elementary and then grade school, middle school. We saw films, we had health classes, and we were told smoking's bad for you. Saw the films on the detrimental effects of what smoking can do to you and the diseases it can cause and the early lifespan you may inherit there, and also with the we even saw people who were so addicted to nicotine that had the movies of having tracheotomies and sticking a cigarette in the middle of their throat because they had that nicotine addiction. But you know what? We all know this. I knew this as a youngster. I never touched a cigarette in my life. And my father, God rest his soul, he smoked, and it broke my heart every day because I used to tell him about the fears and about the cheers and about the detriments of smoking. But he knew what he was doing. Everyone does.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as, like I said, as long as you're able to make your choice, you
exactly.
You suffer the consequences. Anything catching your eye in the world today you want to chat about real quick before?
Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, if you're into politics and have been paying attention to these primaries, I'll tell you what. We had a big day yesterday with a Super Tuesday, and our man Donald Trump did a clean sweep in a fashion that was not just a majority decision, but it was a knockout. And I think the writing on the wall outside the machines of the GOP or wherever else they may act, but he had a good day yesterday, and I think Ted Cruz and Kasich, they can team up all they want. I think that the party is have to look at things very carefully because Donald Trump is going to have the overwhelming votes from a lot of the conservatives or people out there that want to see him up there. Anything less than that is going to do something very detrimental to the GOP. And on the DNC side, Hillary Clinton did a good walloping also of Bernie Sanders. Hey, Trump came out with a statement. He said, Bernie should still stay in the race. He's telling everybody, of course, Cruz and Kasich to get out of the race. He said, hey, Bernie should stay in the race, or maybe he should think about a third party.
Yeah, I don't care who is in the race as long as Hillary's not. But interesting thing about Donald Trump, I just want to mention real quick before we let you go again, Sal. But he's scheduled to do a speech. I don't know if it's tonight or later in the week or whatever, in Washington D.C. on his foreign policy, which he's been criticized by the media, who likes to control what people hear and see. It's going to be interesting to see what he says, and if I could assume Donald Trump's mindset, I'm sure this is going to be an accurate. He can't go on his normal, where he's picking on people and acting like a bully. I think that this is really could separate him and get people that are on the fence and don't think that he could do a job as a president. I think if he really puts together a really good speech on foreign policy, I think that could really ultimately get him where he wants to be, although he feels he's already there. What's your quick thoughts?
That's a very good point. I think that now is the time that the Donald Trump, who wants to be the leader, who wants to be president, should start putting the presidential moves and the leadership moves in place. And he's got to articulate to the public that there's going to be certain things that he's going to look for. He might even want to start talking about his cabinet, who he's going to appoint for every role. That might give him some momentum. If he builds a dream team, such as past presidents have done so, maybe he'll get some of the support. If he says, hey, I'd like to nominate this person for this, I'd like to bring in this person for that. There again, we're going to see a businessman who's learning how to delegate and to have the roles filled by competent professionals that would all meet at the round table or the Oval Room and talk about how business should be done. But I think his plan for foreign policy, yes, it should be given to the American public. I think now he's got to pull in and maybe the GOP, somebody should really sit down and they can have a meeting of the minds. They could say, hey, look, we understand, but this is what we're going to expect and this is what I think you should do. And he's either going to tell him to fly off a cliff or he's going to say, hey, I could see you on this point, but let's have a happy medium and let's see what happens. Whatever is happening, I think he's got the microphone, he's got the attention of a lot of people. And I think this speech is going to be very, very pinnacle and very important because he's got to still win over a lot of people.
Yep.
A lot of female voters and a lot of people that are on the fence, and he's got to have to win over the people that do want Ted Cruz or do want John Kasich.
All right, Sal, great thoughts, and we'll look forward to you next time, my man.
All right, I do want to make some thoughts about Kasich next week or when we talk again.
Sounds good, my man. We'll talk soon.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Care. Bye-bye.
That's Sal, Rocky Cenicola, stepping in when he wasn't expected to. We'll be back in 2.
The Billy C Morning Show will be right back.
Join us here for 2 hours as Billy and the gang do what they do best.
Every time I start talking about boxing, a white man got to pull Rocky Marciano out their ass. Rocky Marciano was good, but compared to Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano ain't.
Beat Joe Lewis's ass.
Joe Louis was 75 years old when he fought. Huh?
What?
We're supposed to be talking boxing.
It's Talking Boxing with Billy C.
Hey, fight fans, check out KOFantasyBoxing.com. KO Fantasy Boxing is boxing's only trademarked fantasy game. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Select your own gym, your own fighters, track them through a season that can last from 3 months to a year, depending upon which league you join. You got to check this out, man, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Join it today. Again, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. And tell him Billy C sent ya.
Check out BillyCBoxing.com now, or feel the wrath of the mighty mustache.
Oh, that hurts. Why are you doing that to my face? I hate you.
That's BillyCBoxing.com. Consider this your warning.
Now back to the Billy C Morning Show, part of the Billy C Boxing Network. Interact with the show at BillyCBoxing.com.
And we're back. You're listening to the Billy C Morning Show right here on ESPN New Hampshire. Glad you guys could join us. We appreciate being part of your morning, and we appreciate being part of your sports programming. And we're in our 13th year, and one of the favorite segments on this show,
Blast from the past. We shine the spotlight again on fighters from years past.
Marciano, top-ranking heavyweight. Joe Louis is the leading contender.
Joe Frazier with a left hook. Good right hand thrown by Foreman that time. Look at that left hook. Belt that goes to Ray Mancini.
It's Blast from the Past on Talkin' Boxing.
And this week's Blast from the Past, which is being sponsored by KOFantasyBoxing.com. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Features, a name that most every boxing fan knows, whether they saw a fight of his on film or not. He is clearly one of the all-time greats, top 10 pound for pound in most people's lists, former world heavyweight champion and boxing Hall of Famer Joe Louis. And joining me right now to tell us all about Joe Louis is my man Alex Perpali. What's up, brother?
Good morning, Billy C. How are you? Yes, one of my favorites.
Joe Louis, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, how could you not like Joe Louis? And we're always talking about, Joe Louis, how he would have fared today, and all that stuff. And we'll get a chance to chat about it right now.
Yeah, I think. When I think of the great heavyweight champions, for me, it's there's four that. Personally, I think there's you could almost argue it's a tie for number one between Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali. I kind of think Muhammad Ali's cultural impact gives him a little bit of an edge to Joe Louis, but you could argue that Joe Louis's cultural impact was just as significant, if not more. There couldn't have been an Ali without a Joe Louis. But for me, it's Ali, Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey. Those are some of the greatest.
It's funny. It's funny you mention all those names because they all had a major cultural impact during their eras. Joe Louis is along the lines of a Muhammad Ali because of racial tension and some of the things that he did. First of all, he was embraced by all fight fans and Americans specifically, especially with his big win over Schmeling. Regardless of the color of his skin, during a time when racial relations weren't that great, and he even carried things further, which I know I'm jumping the gun, but he did a lot of stuff for this country that this country ended up screwing him over when he fought for free during the war to generate money for the country and everything else, and ultimately the government went after him for the taxes he didn't realize he owed. But he also refused to do exhibitions for the troops because we actually, I say we, meaning the United States, actually had the nerve to expect Joe Louis to put on a boxing exhibition and not allow the black soldiers to be able to sit anywhere near the white soldiers. And Joe Louis refused to do these exhibitions unless the black soldiers got equal treatment. And talk about the beginning of something that, like you mentioned, Muhammad Ali, he came in at a time and there were still a lot of tensions actually at one of the all-time highs when he came in, and I see some parallels there.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that's one of the things that Joe Louis was more, even though he was revolutionary in terms of at the time, like you're saying, in terms of the race issues, segregation in the Army. The fact that he went to the Army was one of those things at the time that was a significant thing. Of course, it was I can't think of the word, but like, he was supporting the war effort, whereas Ali later was the opposite, and that was, of course, much more difficult for America to swallow. He became more of an anti-hero in that sense, a counter-revolutionary type guy. Even though, if you make the argument that each one of these men was a sort of revolution to the sport, and I think that's one of the things that I think it's significant when you think these are some of the biggest names we're talking about the last couple of blasts we've done, and especially when you get to these heavyweight champions like Joe Louis. The heavyweight champion, right now it's not really the case that he's so dominant. Everyone knows their name, and that adage that John L. Sullivan started, that I can lick any son of a bitch in the house. That is the niche that a heavyweight champion occupies. He should be part folk hero. I don't think UFC, I heard you and Sal talking earlier about UFC's popularity, and I actually had the TV on. I rewatched the Golovkin bloodletting as I was doing the data on the title bout game, and just flipping to, before I got to the fight, I passed through Good Morning America, and there's a huge spot on UFC spot that they're doing, and as they always do, they have they go through the motions of doing the actual have a couple of the anchors put on gloves and do it. They do that with boxing too, but just to see the popularity of it, you know, what you and Sal were saying were absolutely right. I mean, it has gotten mainstream acceptance right now, and I think the brutality factor, I know I'm getting sidetracked a bit, but the brutality factor is not keeping the mainstream away, and that's interesting because that's one of the arguments people say about boxing. The mainstream doesn't like it because it's brutal. Well, look at this. This is everybody's having their breakfast, and they're showing these people, like you and Sal were saying, tackling each other and raining blows upon each other. There's something much more civilized about boxing, and that's the kind of fighter that Joe Louis definitely was. That was freakish about him was that he coupled both brutality, but this very precise, incredibly accurate puncher in the confines of the ring. He was a dignified man. He was a gentleman. And that was just what the sport needed. And I think, in a way, you could argue that African Americans at the time, in order for blacks to be accepted into boxing, he was the first black heavyweight champion since Jack Johnson. And that was a major fact. I mean, the fact that he had Jack Blackburn as his trainer, that was a big deal because Blackburn had learned, right, because he was a lightweight in the era of Jack Johnson. He learned what Jack Johnson had done that really turned off the white establishment, and he made sure that Joe Louis didn't fall into those pitfalls. He had a bunch of rules. One of them was never be pictured with a white woman, never brag, always be humble. And that was one of the things also is let your right fist be your referee, knock guys out. And that was one thing that the young Joe Louis, man, you could guarantee would knock guys out. When you watch the replays now, they're startling knockouts. They almost look like Tyson type things where, you hit the guy and he'll go all over the place. The guy will go down as a corkscrew. They're out before they hit the ground. I mean, some of his knockouts were pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the difference I always look at between him and Tyson, the end result was similar, like you point out, but the delivery of the punch, Mike Tyson had a punch that looked vicious from the time it released until the time it landed. Joe Louis had a knack for punching, short, compact, powerful punches where, if you glanced away, you'd miss it. And, in an era where they didn't have replay and everything else, I'm sure that was the case many times when people filled the stadiums to go see Joe Louis fight. But he was able to be very methodical and just, lights out. And it's what made him so fan-friendly. And the fact that, like you allude to, pretty much I'll sum it up, he was told to behave because of the, racial tension of the times. Just to jump off topic, I mean, that's one of the reasons I've loved Jack Johnson so much, because Jack Johnson, 30, 40 years prior, felt that, basically screw you to the establishment. I want to be myself. I want to do, what I do and be respected for it. And he was ahead of his time, and Joe Louis got that back on track. And since then, it's been a different ballgame for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I think even in America, he definitely changed the culture. I mean, in my own family, one of my oldest relatives right now is my great aunt Lydia, and you could still talk to her. Her father was this little, Italian immigrant who, the Italians, and blacks, maybe there wasn't the greatest relationship there. I mean, some members of my family, I don't know, that idea of like dating a black person, is not too popular. But the idea of, the reverence that even today, if you mention Joe Louis to my aunt, she will say, "Oh, my father loved him." And they used to listen to him on the radio. There was something about him and the way he carried himself that that dignity that appealed especially to immigrant populations, because I think that they, and of course to blacks, because this was a hero, somebody to look up to. Just the little facts and figures, I forgot to do these. He was born May 13th, 1914, son of a sharecropper. He was born in Lafayette, Alabama, but he did most of his growing up in Detroit, Michigan. He 6'1 3/4", not a real huge heavyweight, but big, especially for the time. You know, some of his best wins, he's around 197, but he did fight up into like the 215, almost 220 range. But not a big man compared to today's standards, that's for sure.
But he was considered a giant back in the day, and
yeah,
that was it's amazing. You know, he started his career, his pro career, in 1934, and you know what makes me laugh about some of the comments about Joe Louis that were taking place even during his era, and even today, some of the young people that just don't have a clue and don't want to give some of these guys the credit. But check this out. In his pro debut, Alex, he fights and knocks a guy out, Jack Kraken. He knocked him out in the first round in Chicago. 37 pro fights Jack Kraken had. He was 27 wins, 7 losses, and 3 draws. A type of fighter you see get fed to a so-called champion today. All right, and that's the realistic fact. That you get a champion today, a guy wearing a trinket belt, and the type of opponent you generally see them put in with is a Jack Kraken type guy, a guy with 27 wins, 7 losses, and 3 draws. This was Joe Louis's pro debut. In his 12th professional fight, he fought Lee Rampage, who had a record of 40 wins, 8 losses, and 5 draws, 53 fights under his belt in his 12th fight. Types of fighters that never get put in against by today's standards. I mean, just a different era, and you could see why boxing was mainstream sports during Joe Louis's time.
Oh yeah, and look at what all those results. He's just flattening guys. First round knockout, third round knockout, second round knockout, fourth round knockout. I mean, he delivered in terms of the thrills. And by the time he's fighting guys like Primo Carnera, Max Baer, he's really making a name for himself. The thing that, and I think you talk about this, about how boxing is a craft, and because boxing is not a team sport, I think people, I don't know, there's things that are passed down, and it's almost like there's different schools of boxing, different fraternities, if you will. Well, maybe that's the wrong word to use, because, I mean, of course, women's boxing has plenty of good fighters as well. But it does seem as if, when you think about it, Jack Blackburn comes out of an age of fighting, not too long before this, and now here he has this protege in Joe Louis, who is now learning the craft from him and is going to take it forward into the next generation. I think we see that a lot. I mean, in a way, it even happens today when you have trainers that are former fighters that are now tutoring a young fighter. I mean, you got it in John David Jackson and Sergey Kovalev. But I do think that that's significant, because, especially in this case, because of the racial, climate, and how that giving Joe Louis that advice was really a major positive, a major arrow in his quiver for becoming a star. But when it came to just plain old stuff, keep winning, the things that ended up biting him in the ass were, in the Max Schmeling fight, were just plain not training and women. And Joe liked golf, and he spent too much time golfing and not enough time in the gym before that first fight with Max Schmeling.
You know, I'm always talking about how fighters today, and it's not their fault, it's their management and promoters' fault, and even the networks to a degree, where they're, coddled and protected, and, all of a sudden they get this title shot, and, should they come out on top, then we have to hear that they're still developing, or it's a short-lived reign, and then we hear the know-it-all fans saying that they were exposed, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you take a look at Joe Louis's record, and I indicated before his pro debut against a 37-fight veteran, and you go on and you start looking at the level of opposition that this guy fought, fight after fight, just increasing it with big names of the time, with very respectable records. You mentioned Primo Carnera, obviously a former world champion, 81-7 when he fought him in the Bronx in 1935. Max Baer, as you also mentioned, Jack Sharkey, all on his way up to his world title shot. And then that first bump in the road, like you alluded to with the Max Schmeling fight, I think it was a clear case of taking his opponent a little too lightly, maybe not training as hard as he usually did, and also an unknown, because they didn't have the media and they didn't have the availability to film. And I think that, collectively, not just Joe Louis's fault, but collectively the Joe Louis team, were beat that night because of lack of preparation in every angle. And credit to Max Schmeling, he did try to study as much as he could on Joe Louis, and felt, and he said it from the time that fight was signed, that he saw something and he would expose Joe Louis, and he came true on that prediction.
Yeah, he certainly did. I see something. That's what he was telling the press, and he was right, that Louis had a habit of dropping his left hand a little bit and leaving an opening for a big right. And even though Schmeling was in semi-retirement, his career, most of the best of his career was before this, and he had been a former champion, but he was pretty faded. So the idea that he was going to mostly be a good name on the record, but of course this is a guy with danger in his fists. He could hit, and because he saw that opening, he saw that one flaw that Louis had. He exploited it, and from Joe Louis, I guess, also has a soft spot for me because it was the first fighter autobiography I've ever read, and it was a really good one. Right after I got into sport when I was 15, his autobiography was what I read. Joe Louis, My Life. It was written in '78. It's pretty good, and the way he describes it, that first fight with Schmeling. In the second round, I hit him, boom, 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 with jabs. Didn't seem to bother him. Then I just did what Chappie told me not to do, drop in a left hook. As soon as I did, Schmeling came in with a right hand over that, got me right on the chin. I thought I'd swallowed my mouthpiece. I was dazed. Everything clouded over. I don't know how I stayed on my feet. I kept jabbing till my head cleared a little bit. He ends up going, 12 rounds, but I always was struck by that he thought he swallowed his mouthpiece.
I tell you, they don't make them like they used to anymore. They don't make mouthpieces like they used to either, but they don't make fighters anymore.
But
because,
human beings, yeah.
Yeah, because, today, I mean, even the nature of a knockdown and as we've discussed with the rules, obviously prior to Joe Louis, but, they waive off fights. Now, when you watch some of these old fight films, and you see the punishment that they're allowed to inflict on an opponent before a referee even comes into the picture, is just amazing. He finally gets, after, that loss, he clearly rebounded and came back with a huge win against Jack Sharkey and several other fighters that were, known commodities in the sport, including Bob Pastor, which catapulted him finally to his shot at a world title against the Cinderella Man himself, Jim Braddock. And, what that fight, which landed him the title, he goes and fights a couple of more fights. Tommy Farah, a guy that we did a blast on, Nathan Mann, which was exciting for 3 rounds, all the way up until June 22nd, 1938, when he got his rematch with Max Schmeling. And, that fight, and I have the luxury of having the actual radio recording, thanks to Steve Lawton, Big Fights Incorporated, that we played live when we did our show out of Vegas several years ago. And I tell you, when I heard it for the first time with Steve off air, of course, and if I listen to it again right now, it's the hairs stand up. Even with little ones I got left, they stand up, because you knew what was going on. You knew the impact and the announcement and how the announcer was, and as he's calling that fight, and all of the situation surrounding it with World War II and the German establishment at that time, Nazi Germany, and I mean, what a significant fight, Alex.
Yeah, I think that you could argue that this, in terms of historical significance, that rematch with Schmeling might have been the most significant fight. Definitely for the heavyweight title, I would say. You could maybe argue that Ali Frazier won was similar, because it was sort of a internal struggle that the United States was sort of having with itself, where you had the draft dodger versus the sort of establishment guy. But as we know, that a lot of times what these memes that are that are sort of being carried into the ring, they're not completely true, of course. That's the beauty of boxing, is to some degree, it's to a great degree, it's metaphor, and metaphors sort of are dependent on what you bring to it. But there was no mistaking this one. I mean, this 1938, Hitler was already, expanding in Europe and expanding Germany's empire. We knew that we were going to be probably facing them at some point, but we just, we hadn't forgotten World War I. So the idea of going off to start another war, that wasn't too appetizing to a lot of people, but it seemed that there was a mounting evil, just plain straight up evil, that we would have to confront. And unfairly, Max Schmeling became the representative of that, but that's what sport does to some extent, and some of that is good, I think, because it's better to live out some of your nationalistic pride through, watching two guys in a ring rather than going to war. But of course, it's not fair to say that Schmeling was a Nazi, and quite honestly, when you look at his life, he certainly wasn't.
Let me just add two things real quick, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back to this. But number one, the difference between Ali and Lewis with the two wars, a guy that served his country versus a guy who was a draft dodger. Ali, not that I'm defending him, but the truth of the matter is aside from his religious beliefs, the war itself was very controversial, the Vietnam War. And you know this. I mean, it wasn't our war, and I think that was the problem with society at that time. And Ali, believed that, plus he sprinkled in his religious beliefs. Versus Joe Louis, during a time when everybody kind of banded together. It was a world war, but when we went to war, everybody wanted to, in a sense. There was some pride. It wasn't like, hey, mind your own business. It was like, hey, let's defend our country. We don't want to be speaking German. I mean, that's what everyone was seeing in the news. Germany taking over country after country after country, and methodically trying to control the planet. And so in all fairness to Ali, even though I at the time was like everyone else. I was young, of course, but really young. But like everyone else, he was painted as the bad guy. And the other thing too, I just want to mention about Max Schmeling before we take a break is, ironically enough, the two biggest fights of Joe Louis's career, you could argue, was against Max Schmeling, his first loss, and then of course the avenging loss in the first round, destruction of Max Schmeling. You know, later on, these two guys, although they didn't get to spend a hell of a lot of time together, where they were actually in the same room, became very close friends. And as a matter of fact, Max Schmeling made some smart investments. And you know, with the money he made from boxing, he invested in some crazy idea to bring to Germany. They call it Coca-Cola, and the guy was so rich. I mean, he made so much money. He ended up controlling all the Coca-Cola in Europe. You know, which you got to give him credit for. And he actually would send Joe Louis money throughout Joe Louis's life just to take care of the guy. That's the kind of guy that Schmeling was. Hold that thought, Alex. We got to take a break here, but hold that thought, and we'll be back in 2.
The Billy C Morning Show will be right back. Part of the Billy C Boxing Network.
Broadcasting in all corners of the globe, on the web and radio.
He would scoff at a stretch of that man, I would think.
You're listening to Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. from upstate New York and the good old US of A.
Boxing is here to stay because we are here to stay.
The best 2 hours of boxing talk on the airwaves.
Hey, fight fans, check out KOFantasyBoxing.com. KO Fantasy Boxing is boxing's only trademarked fantasy game. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Select your own gym, your own fighters, track them through a season that can last from 3 months to a year, depending upon which league you join. You got to check this out, man. www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Join it today. Again, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com, and tell them Billy C sent ya.
Check out BillyCBoxing.com now, or feel the wrath of the mighty mustache.
Oh, that hurts. Why are you doing that to my face? I hate you.
That's BillyCBoxing.com. Consider this your warning.
Now back to the Billy C Morning Show. Interact with the show at BillyCBoxing.com, part of the Billy C Boxing Network.
And we're back. You're listening to the Billy C Morning Show right here on ESPN New Hampshire, and I'm joined right now with my man Alex Papalian. We're in the middle of doing a blast from the past on former world heavyweight champion and boxing Hall of Famer Joe Louis. And Alex, just to finish up my thought and get yours, you know, Max Schmeling invested in Coca-Cola, took care of Joe Louis, actually paid for his funeral and everything else. But one of the things, you know, people are always talking about, he was on thin ice in Germany, and Hitler really, warned him that if he didn't win that fight against Max Schmeling, against Joe Louis in New York, that, pretty much he'd be sent to the Russian front. The only thing that protected Max Schmeling, I believe, was the fact that he was married to a very prominent and popular actress, a German actress. And because of that, the fact that they were in the limelight all the time, they felt that for political and PR reasons, that they couldn't actually hang him from a tree because of his loss, because it might cause some kind of uprising. So I think that's pretty much saved Schmeling's life and gave him the ability to become so successful, because you would assume that, you crossed Hitler, you didn't last long.
Yeah, and he that swimmer girlfriend. Boy, I'm having trouble today here, huh?
It's catchy. It's catchy.
Girlfriend,
I started.
Hitler seemed to have a little crush on. So yeah, that protected him, and I do think that you're right. I mean, that was one of the things that was behind the build up to the fight, was the whole aspect of both guys had met with their country's leader. You had the great moment where. FDR had met with Joe Louis and put his hand around his bicep and said to him, we're going to need muscles like this to fight Germany. So he knew even at that time that it was coming. And Max Schmeling had been called even in the dressing room by Adolf Hitler. So to be encouraged. They really thought he was going to dominate him, and of course, it's nothing of the sort. This is a major, major fact that makes Joe Louis a mega badass. And at least I know people might get annoyed that I always bring up Mike Tyson, but this is where he's better than Mike Tyson in terms of historical greatness and what you measure a champion. He erased a loss. He came back from a loss. Tyson never knocked out Buster Douglas. Buster Douglas destroyed Mike Tyson, and that's the way history remembers it. Joe Louis and Max Schmeling were 1-1. And the rematch, you couldn't be more devastating. Remember, we talked also, one of the things that was interesting about both Rocky Marciano and Louis, they were these guys who took power naps. And Louis takes a power nap before he goes out there and levels Schmeling. One of the punches, you could see it, Schmeling actually screams, a shot to the ribs that cracked 2 vertebrae. He is all over him, stops him around, and in his autobiography, he mentions, I know now this was the top of my career. I had the championship, and I had beaten. So for him, to a great degree, he didn't consider himself champion until he avenged that loss. Again, something Mike Tyson never did. I mean, that's something that, Ali did. All the greats did that. They got back the man who got them. I know now this was the top of my career. I had the championship, and I'd beaten the man who had humiliated me. America was proud of me. My people were proud of me. And since the fight, race relations were lightening up. Who the hell could ask for more?
It's just a different mindset, Alex, and it's something we talk about on a regular basis. There was more pride in fighters. I mean, there was more pride to prove to everyone that they were the best, and of course they were making a living at it. But pride was actually number one, and you can see that very clearly in that quote you just read. Something that's long gone in today's sport, in my opinion. But he would go on after that fight against Max Schmeling. He would actually go on to fight the guys that were considered the bums of the month club. And like we've talked about, several times, the bums of the month club, most of those fighters would actually be world champions today. When you look at Tony Galento, I'm sure Bob Pastor, Johnny Paycheck was a good fighter, Al McCoy, Arturo Godoy, Gus D'Orazio, Abe Simon was a monster, Buddy Bear, of course. He had the fight with Billy Conn that he was losing in, a very famous fight, and then he finally knocks out Conn in the 13th round. Lou Nova, all this stuff, and then he goes on to serve the country. And this is where I think it's a travesty. Here's a guy in Joe Louis that goes into he fights for our country. First of all, he's active fighter, and he goes and is in the Army. Then he fights because he was so beloved, and because everyone knew who he was. He goes and fights these war bond, raising war bond monies. These fights that he would donate his whole purse to. And then what does our government do? They go after him for him not paying tax, even though he donated all the money and didn't get any money. Whatever that figure was, he owed income tax. And ultimately the IRS was after Joe Louis until the day he died. And it was, obviously we don't have time to get into, the things that they used to do to this man. But, I read extensive, it's no wonder that the demise of Joe Louis and what many people believe, really sped up his death. It's not shocking to hear because of the relentlessness and inhumane way that our own government treated a national treasure.
Yeah, and when you think about it in a big way, what happened to him is now it happens somewhat routinely to fighters because, like you said, I mean, Joe Louis had that special circumstance of doing so much sort of charity boxing, but it's very easy for fighters because of the nature of the finances, the financial reporting and stuff of making purses and then, getting advances on purses and all that kind of thing. Without sound management and good advisors, you can get behind with the IRS pretty easily. And it happens to lots of fighters, and it absolutely plagued Joe Louis, like you said. And he had some issues with drug addiction as well. He did, for a little while, was hooked on heroin and issues with dementia. So that issue, the fact that, like we see a lot, it's not reported. I don't know. I mean, when you look at the guys we do in the Blast from the Past, I've never done a percentage, Bill, but there's quite a few that end up with some form of brain disease. That shouldn't be surprising. And Joe Louis was certainly no exception. But yeah, just one thing about that Billy Conn fight, there was a few things that were fascinating about that. That really was, the idea, he was maybe marked the end of the Bum of the Month Club, because he was an absolutely peerless boxer as a light heavyweight, moving up to challenge for the greatest prize in sports. And I think one of the things, there's a couple of great quotes from that. Remember the "he can run but he can't hide." That's Joe Louis, who said that leading into the fight, when people were like, that this guy's going to be able to outbox you. And he was. He was outboxing Joe going in, after 12 rounds. But he made the mistake of all Irish, he got too brave for his own good. And in that round, in the 13th, he came out to try to knock Joe out. And Joe, being the patient, puncher that he was, accurate puncher, takes him out in the 13th. And there's that, in that old HBO show they talked about, I forget, it was in the 80s, Boxing's Greatest Knockouts or something. They had that moment where Billy Conn was saying, he saw Joe afterwards, and he's like, Joe, why couldn't you just let me win that night? I just wanted to hold the title for 6 months, go around the corner to the barber shop and tell the guys I was a heavyweight champion of the world. And Louis said to him, 6 months? How the hell are you going to hold my title for 6 months? You had it for 12 rounds and couldn't keep it.
Exactly. And there was a lot of stories. Billy Conn was haunted till the day he died about that fight. And, and you're right, he had the fight won. He was, boxing beautifully, controlling the fight, was keeping Joe Louis at bay. And you're right, he went to, in between rounds, says, I think I got him. I think I'm going to knock him out. And ultimately, the end. And years later, they would, be at these events together where they would replay that fight. And Billy Conn was always noted as, walking in and watching the fight, and then right after the 12th round, he'd get up and walk out and say, well, now it's Joe Louis. It's Joe Louis. He comes in on this. This is where he comes in. It was his fight up until the 12th, up and through the 12th. And then ultimately losing in the 13th.
And that fight also, I think that fight probably goes a long way in supporting the adage, the boxing adage, that a good big man beats a good little man. Because that's exactly what happened in that.
When you get a little cocky and you let the tables turn back to size.
Right,
Billy Conn was smart all the way up to that point. Their rematch took place in 1946 after both men served in the World War II. It wasn't the same, of course, but this time Joe Louis knocked him out in 8. Joe Louis would retire from boxing for a little while after his win over Jersey Joe Walcott, the second one, in which he knocked out Walcott. He retired for a little bit, then came back and got to fight the current champion, who was Ezra Charles. Lost the decision, but decided that he was still going to make a comeback. Climbed up the ladder, getting a couple of decent wins, including a name that we've mentioned several times, Lee Savold, who at the time had 100 wins against 36 losses. He knocked him out in 6 rounds, and also Hall of Famer Jimmy Bivens won a 10-round decision against him, which ultimately set him up for his not only final world title shot, but his final fight against Rocky Marciano. And he was no match for The Rock, getting stopped in the 8th round. and really the fight could have been stopped a little sooner. Took a lot of punishment in that fight, and walked away from the ring finally for good.
Yeah, and I tell you, if you love Joe Louis, and who doesn't, watching that fight with Marciano is very sad. But when you do look at his record, he had put together a few wins, and I guess you know what you could maybe liken it to is, remember when Evander Holyfield towards the end of his career, when he fought like Valuev and guys like that, you thought, boy, I just don't like seeing him in the ring, but he kept winning. And looking halfway decent, way past what you thought he could. So that idea that he was sort of this sacrificial lamb to Marciano, I think, is a little bit wrong-headed. He wasn't himself, that's for sure. He was a shadow of his former self, and Marciano, destroyed him.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about it is that fight against Rocky Marciano, after a long career, after 68 previous fights, and how everybody said, oh, he's past his prime. He was only 37 years old. I mean, I say only 37 because by today's standards, there's heavyweights out there that don't even start boxing until their late 20s, So here's a guy that was 37. And I mean, after boxing, he became a greeter, which he loved at Caesar's Palace, but it was kind of like, the lion in the cage, and very, disheartening to see such a popular guy. He also did a stint in wrestling to try to make money. I mean, here's a guy that, should have been financially well off, and he wasn't. And I just, the saddest thing I remember about Joe Louis, obviously I wasn't old enough to watch him fight or anything like that, but I did get to watch them wheel him in for the final fight that he ever saw, and he died a little bit afterwards. He was in a wheelchair. He was wearing that hat. I'll never forget it. And when I saw him, they put his name underneath Joe Louis. I'm saying to myself, oh, this poor guy, And then to realize today that he was 66 years old, looking like he was about 150, was pretty sad. Yeah, he had definitely seen a lot of mileage, and it was, getting old is rough, and he especially, between the battering he took in the ring, like I mentioned, some drug addiction. He had been he had some dementia. He was in asylums at points, but he had these great friendships, like you mentioned, with Max Schmeling, Schmeling was a friend who helped him at certain points in his career. Frank Sinatra was another guy who was incredibly generous to Joe Louis. So he was beloved. He was not. I get the feeling that he wasn't alone in those final years. And when he passed away, it was of a heart attack at 66. So I know we could talk about Joe Louis all day, but we're almost out of time. So who'd you put him in against with the Title Bout Championship computer game? I put him in against. Actually, I only put him in against two of the champions. I forgot about Anthony Joshua. I guess we got to consider him a legitimate belt holder now. He does have the IBF, but I only put him in against Tyson Fury and Luis Ortiz. And as expected, size does not matter. Not when you're dealing with one of the greatest of all time. Joe Louis destroys Tyson Fury. The first time they fight, he stops him by knockout in the fourth round. 2:52 of round number 4. He dropped him a minute of the round. Fury rises, but he was not going to make it out of the fourth, and Joe stopped him. When they fight 100 times, Louis dominates. 97 wins, 2 defeats, 1 draw, 96 knockouts. Of those 2 wins, Fury scored them both by KO. Against Luis, the real King Kong Ortiz, Ortiz is destroyed in 3 rounds. 2:43 of the first fight. He was down twice in the second and then stopped under a fusillade of blows. When they fight 100 times, Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, dominates. 99 victories, 1 defeat, 70 wins by knockout. Of that one victory Ortiz win, he scored by knockout. Not surprising. The last couple,
No.
the last couple of blasts when we've been picking some of these obvious all-time greats, the Title Bout Championship computer game has followed suit. So,
And actually, when I said when I pushed the button that says fight, it said, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah, right. It said, "Come on, what fight?" Joe Louis had a career record 66 wins, 52 coming by knockout, which gave him a 75% knockout ratio. He was only had 3 losses in his whole career, being stopped twice, once by the late great Rocky Marciano, the aforementioned Max Schmeling, and his third loss against Ezra Charles. He was a Hall of Famer and, of course, a former world heavyweight champ. Joe Louis, one of the greatest fighters in the heavyweight division, and also, in my opinion, pound for pound, that ever laced up a pair of gloves. Great job as usual, Alex. And as usual, I'm going to ask you for some quick thoughts as we wrap it up here in a couple minutes. First and foremost, Triple G takes care of Dominic Wade. No surprise there. He's getting under a lot of criticism, and it really pisses me off because what's he supposed to do? Nobody wants to fight this guy. But the fight that I enjoyed, and I want to get your thoughts on Triple G, but also run that real quick with Roman Gonzalez, who, despite not getting a knockout, I thought put on a clinic against a good opponent in McWilliams-Arroyo. What's your thoughts on those two fights?
Yeah, I thought that was the only fight really worth watching that night. He looked awesome. That was a lot of fun. And again, referring to the conversation you and Sal were having about UFC, that's what I don't understand, how that's not appealing. 12 rounds of that, to me, is a hell of a lot more appealing than, 20 minutes of guys, punching each other while they're on the ground and kicking. And
you know what it is? You know what it is real quick, Alex? I think the strength, and this is what I believe, because we can say that the young people don't pay attention. Their attention span is different. They want something quick and furious, and then that's it. But I think the fact that that MMA, at least the grandpappy of MMA, UFC, is a league, and leagues have a tendency to have more strength. It's not an individual. Even though we're watching two individuals fight, the league has got some juice. They're the ones that have the sponsors. They're the ones that are getting the promotion. People know about that. And boxing is different. You got so much division in boxing that it's hard to really, even from a fan, but definitely from a corporate view. I mean, it's hard to really embrace. And I think once MMA, the stats start coming out, which they are now, about how dangerous it is, you're going to start seeing people singing a different tune.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I do think that that was the thing that, and people are down on Roy Jones lately, but I thought he was pretty good with his commentary in describing what Chocolatito was doing. I don't know. I never liked Roy that much as a fighter. I learned to appreciate him over the years. I do enjoy him as a commentator. But I know I'm one of the few. In terms of the Golovkin fight, it was more, Max even made the comparison to Mike Tyson. If we want to compare that to Mike Tyson, then that fight was like Carl the Truth Williams or Bruce Seldon. It wasn't Bruce Seldon was just plain scared. I didn't think Wade was scared as much as he was sort of going through the motions. It was a little bit of a non-effort, I thought, from him. Golovkin did what he always does. But I don't know. That fight was of his recent impressive wins. That one was definitely one that's forgettable. But again, like you said, it's not really his fault. I wish it was Toriano Johnson. That would have been a much more entertaining fight. I hope that fight gets made if we can't see the Canelo fight.
People won't give him. They won't give him credit against Johnson. They'll say he's not. The naysayers are just they're out of control. It's just another reason that I personally lose an interest. I don't mean to cut you off. Where I gotta go. I got two fights I want to ask you about. Who you think's going to win? First and foremost, the rematch: Victor Ortiz against Andre Berto. Who do you like in that one?
That fight really snuck up on me. I really forgot that was going to be this week, and I'm really excited about that. I think Ortiz beats him and beats him badly, but I wouldn't be shocked if Berto has his moments because both guys are not that good, and I think that Ortiz we know has moments of where his confidence goes right out the window. He should be confident, but his layups are enormous. I'm excited for that fight. It could be fun, but it doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot.
No, it doesn't. And ironically enough, Berto is a slight favorite in Vegas. And Badeau,
really? Wow, that's funny. I guess he should be. He's certainly been more active.
Badeau Jack, who's a fighter I thought was absolute garbage, but in all due respect to Jack, he's really improved, and I think he's a legitimate champion right now. He's taken on a guy that at one time I thought was the best super middleweight in the world. Far from that now in Lucien Boutte. Who do you like in that one?
This one I think is a little more interesting, but in terms of the big question of is what's left of Boutte. I don't think much. So I like Badeau Jack to win in that one and look pretty good. It could be his sort of best win in terms of name on his record.
I agree with you. Alex, great job as usual, and we'll look forward to you next week, my man.
All right, Billy C. Take care.
That's Alex Papali, and you can catch him when we do our Blast from the Past every week. Programming note, we will be back a week from today, so make sure you tune in and check out the show. Hopefully we'll be back to our normal schedule ASAP, but I'll leave you with this. Don't forget to tune in Tuesday morning. Same bad time, same bad channel. Until then, ciao, baby.